Well, hello, everyone. First thing I need to say is it is November. We're approaching Thanksgiving. Our kids are happy. Times are a little stressful right now, but to be honest, I couldn't be prouder of our community and how we've come together and our kids and how they're learning and our faculty and what they have given. I know that we all speak a lot about this together, but I really think Byram Hills is such a special place, and I couldn't be prouder to be principal of the middle school. So Angelo Ancona is here. I don't know where he is. He's amongst the group. And Lisa Pellegrino is here. She's the mathematics chairperson, 612. There's Mr. Ancona. Looking good, Mr. Ancona.
Hi, everyone.
Mrs. K is here as well. She is the chairperson, 612 of science. So we're going to start today. I'm just going to, besides welcoming everyone, I just wanted to, Lisa and Deb, before we jump in, I wanted to share part of our presentation, then we'll go back to it later. The majority of our principal's coffee today is going to be about the mathematics acceleration and pathways and the science acceleration and pathways that happens primarily really in 7th grade into 8th grade. Things have changed, not drastically, but there have been some modifications to address the hybrid model that we live in. And we will learn all the nuances along with the pathways, because I think what's most important also is that as parents of middle school children, whether you have children in high school or whether this is your first child who's entering the middle school, it's important that you know, one, what options they have in high school, and two, how our hybrid system actually has grown and I think allowed us to be quite confident in our placement process. In the spring of last year, I was a little worried and anxious. We were living through something that we weren't used to, and we didn't know how that would happen, and we always want the placement process to be for the students. It's always about appropriate placement, and to be honest, I think it's gone really well. So Mrs. Pellegrino and Mrs. K will be speaking to you about this. I'm going to share one of my tabs. I wanted to remind everyone that as we've redesigned the middle school in terms of our schedule and how we work together, our systems and structures, we have never lost sight of our central question. And that holds true in math and science. Our kids today are engaged, they're curious, they're involved. Our labs might look a little different, or our rich tasks right now are on pause in math, but they are still extremely engaged and our teachers are quite committed. So I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Pellegrino and Mrs. K.
So welcome everybody, thanks for joining us. So you can see the title there is the HCC Principal's Coffee, November 18th, 2020. But this picture most certainly was not taken this year in 2020 because you can see our students there without masks. So I don't want anyone to think this was a recent photo. But this is a photo from last year, just showing our students working collaboratively on our mathematics and our rich tasks, which is our math pathways. So I'm going to take you 6 through 12 just so that you get the big picture view of what the different pathways look like, both at HCC and then throughout the high school. So everyone coming into HCC takes Math 6. And in Math 6, students are given what we call tiered assignments, which are different levels of assignments based on students' readiness for mathematics. Those assignments continue through 7th grade in Math 7. And at the end of 7th grade, that'll be the first time that students will be recommended for a specific pathway in math, and that's our pathway number 1. So what I want to highlight about pathway number 1, and that's our blue pathway on the bottom, is pathway 1 is both an honors and an accelerated pathway. So that'll be a little bit different than what Deb K will talk about for science, because science doesn't kind of have that double distinction. It's really an accelerated pathway, whereas math, that first pathway is what we would consider an honors and accelerated pathway. The thing to note about that pathway is I always kind of give this analogy of it being a broken clock, in that time moves a little quicker in that pathway. So for example, in Algebra 1A, that class covers more content than what you would normally see just in an Algebra 1 class. Same thing for GOA. So GOA would actually see some of the higher level content move down into that class. Same thing for Algebra 2 Trig A, because what that does is sets us up. So if you'll notice in 11th grade, that class is really half pre-calculus and half calculus. And the reason for that is to enable us to have students be ready for BC Calculus in their senior year. So that is really the goal of pathway number 1. And for those that are not familiar with BC versus AB Calculus, so AP Calculus BC is 2 semesters of college calculus. It's an extremely rigorous course. In some schools, it's actually taught over 2 years or with some sort of supplementation. We teach it in a year, but we take some of that content and move it into 11th grade to enable us to get everything in that course. AP Calculus AB, which is the culmination of that second pathway that I'll talk about in a moment, that's 1 semester of college calculus. So that's still a college level class. It's still a rigorous course. It's just not 2 semesters of college calculus. Okay. So if students do not go into pathway 1, then those students, and this is really the majority of students, would go into pre-algebra in 8th grade. And again, those tiered assessments would continue there. That would set them up for their foundation in their formal algebra course in high school Algebra 1. So our freshmen, for example, that are in Algebra 1 right now, will also receive tiered assignments and options for different instruction as well as assessment, because at the end of this year, we'll make recommendations for those students to go either into what we call our pathway number 2, or more colloquially, it's called our 3 and 2, because it's 3 years of high school math in 2 years, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Or students will go into a traditional pathway with geometry, Algebra 2 Trig, and pre-calculus. So we would expect most students, by the time that they graduate Byram Hills, to have studied either pre-calculus or calculus. So one thing that I want to just mention in terms of what colleges are looking for. Colleges are really looking for one of those 3 classes, either pre-calculus, calculus, or the 2 semesters of calculus BC. The Calc BC is really needed. I always say to parents, it's needed if you're talking about maybe the top 1 or 2 engineering schools in the country. That would be a requirement for them. But as someone that's taught AB for a very long part of my career, I can tell you I've had numerous students that have gone on to very successful engineering programs, haven't taken AB, calculus, and not BC. So there are, again, in each of our courses, Math 6, Math 7, and pre-algebra, as well as Algebra 1A has differentiation as well. There's different options for students to challenge themselves based on their readiness level. So I'm going to move to the next slide now and just talk a little bit, because this is always a question that folks have, is how do you take 3 years of math and put it into 2? Well, what we really do is prioritize. We've spent a lot of time summer after summer going through the curriculum. We went back through the curriculum this summer in the context of the pandemic and what we are going to prioritize in terms of teaching. And those top call-out boxes really tell you what we're prioritizing. So first and foremost, we want to make sure that students are ready for the SAT and ACT in the same way that they normally would. So we would anticipate students usually take those exams in the 11th grade, and what we're hearing from colleges is that is their preferred time for students to take those exams. We also take a look at what is requisite for science so that we can make sure students have the option if they would like to take, for example, physics their junior year or senior year. And then certainly making sure that they're ready to study calculus their senior year, whether that be going into AP Calculus AB, or we also offer a non-AP Calculus option. And on the side call-outs, you see we have New York State standards that help inform our instruction, as well as our local and national standards. And that's what creates our 3 and 2 pathway. The first course that you saw in that prior diagram is called Trig Algebra 2, but the one thing I want to highlight is That's not to say that that course doesn't have any geometry, or if you're saying, well, my son or daughter is going to need some geometry for the SAT, I can tell you that course does have it. It's woven throughout the course, and we've carefully hand selected the topics that are most important for the SAT and ACT, as well as the geometry topics that students would need to know for calculus. The reason that we have called it Trig Algebra 2 as opposed to something with geometry, and Kim, if you just go back one slide just for a second.
Sure.
Is really actually based off of parent feedback and coffees just like this, where parents were concerned if a student, for example, went through that blue pathway and they finished the Geometry A course, but for whatever reason, they're in high school, maybe they've got science research, there's just some reason that they don't feel like that blue pathway is still appropriate for them. We wanted to make sure that there was an option for them to move down. And the feedback that we got from parents was, we don't want it to look like they're repeating a course, even though they were comfortable that we are adding, obviously, new content in that Trig Algebra 2 course, but we don't want it to appear to colleges as they're repeating a course. So that's really the only reason that name distinction is there. Thanks, Kim. So again, that's what's informing our 3 and 2. And again, we went back this summer in light of the pandemic and just made sure that we were kind of hyper-focused on the things that we felt were the absolute most important to go through for this year. The next slide is going to tell you the criteria for this year for 7th graders for that first pathway. So it's kind of in 3 buckets. The first is what you would be probably most familiar with, which is how students are doing on their in-class assessments. And so we would expect that a student would have an average of 93 or better on their in-class assessments, and that's starting in Q2. So I believe you should have received, if not, it'll happen this week, but I think it happened yesterday, Kim, if I'm correct, the letter that went home to parents from the teachers just describing the same criteria. So again, it's starting, as per the letter, it's starting in Q2 and goes through Q4.
And Lisa, I also want to point out to parents that the teachers, the mathematics teachers in 7th grade, it's not 6th or 8th grade, it's 7th grade, will also be explaining this to the students, and there will be a screencastify that students may watch. It's a video that a teacher creates that explains this information with the slides in front of them. That will also be available to parents if you would like to watch it as well, in addition to the letter that we sent home, and we'll be updating this coffee on our acceleration page on HCC's website page.
Great, thank you, Kim.
Sure.
And the teachers, just to echo Kim's point, the teachers meet with the students really at numerous points throughout the year, just to touch base with them and make sure that they're on the same page in terms of their performance and what they're looking to achieve. The next piece there is our standards feedback, which I think folks are familiar with by now, seeing in the portal, making sure that students are staying on top of their work and that they're earning a meets on all of that standards feedback, again, from Q2 through Q4. And then the third piece is our optional extension assignments. So again, these are not required of all students in 7th grade, but if you are a student in 7th grade that is considering that pathway number 1, then we would be expecting that you would earn a meets, which would essentially be achieving those particular assignments with 75% or more of those assignments. So again, it's 75% or more of the optional assignments, and that's from Q2 to Q4. So again, for all 3 of these buckets, it's starting this quarter, continuing next quarter, and then the culmination is the Q4.
And one thing that we would suggest, and Lisa, I hope I'm not taking your thunder on this, there's this tightrope we're trying to walk, which is that in order to get into the Algebra 1 A in 8th grade, students need to be so motivated and independent learners and be able to manage some conceptual understandings that are difficult for others. So we walk this tightrope where we know that we offer these optional activities and extensions to all our students, but we don't insist and push every student to do it, because our belief is if we're pushing a child right now to do it, maybe now's not the right time. That doesn't mean that we don't mention it to them or encourage them, but we don't make it mandatory. And we don't reach out to parents and say, oh, your child isn't doing the extension. What we ask is that you have conversations with your son or daughter and say, have you taken the optional extensions? How are you doing? If you haven't done it, go talk to your teacher. We're trying to get the students to make sure they're interested, they're motivated, and then they're successful, because the bottom line is this is all about just making sure the placement is correct and that they can be challenged appropriately.
Right, and I would definitely echo Kim's sentiment, especially the last one, which is really, we want to make sure that all students are challenged appropriately. And I can tell you, as someone that teaches in that chart, that pre-calc, calc A, you know, it's a very rigorous course. And I always say to students, if you're going to take it, you should be planning to take it through the end of your senior year, meaning you should be in that pathway if your end goal is BC calculus. Because if not, if your end goal is AB calculus, then that second pathway is really the better one for you, because it's going to allow you to better focus on your foundational mathematics. It's going to allow you to better focus on other subjects and not have that kind of opportunity cost of spending so much time, right? So a lot of times people will say, whether it's students or parents, well, I can get tutored, I can do this, but you don't want it to be something where it's taking so much of a student's energy for that one particular class that other classes sacrifice. And again, the end goal of that pathway too is for students to study calculus and to also study it at a collegiate level. The only distinction is that it's not the 2 semesters of college calculus. So just to give you the next slide here, what we're seeing in the classroom. So these are some thoughts from the teachers. So what we see are students embracing multiple approaches to problem solving, because they're able to kind of access the mathematics at different levels. They're able to work towards benchmarks that are specific to their own learning. I always kind of have this quote, like, if everyone in the classroom, and I'll be honest, I say this to my students at the high school as well, if everyone is doing the exact same thing all of the time, personally, I think something's gone wrong. I think people should be able to access benchmarks that are specific to their own learning. We have students that are accurately self-assessing, which is a great skill for them to have as they continue their learning journey, whether it's in mathematics, science, or otherwise. We have flexibility in how we deliver the instruction to students. So what you'll see is flexibility both in instruction and in assessments, students constantly pushing themselves to meet new challenges. And again, to Kim's point, we're never going to force a student, but if we see a student, right, is excelling and we think, hey, they could handle those additional extension assignments, we're going to push them. And I'll tell you, I do the same thing in my classroom. I have what we call level 3, 4, and 5 assignments in pre-calc and calc A. And if I notice a student is always, you know, knocking it out of the park on a level 4, I'm going to say to them, hey, I think next time, like, I think you should spend some time pushing yourself and really try to hit at least one of those level 5s. And what this allows us to do is give students the flexibility and the opportunity to access mathematics if they're ready. That's beyond their grade level.
We can take a few questions. I saw that there was a question, Lisa, that said, will children taking Pathway 2 have received enough content to take the ACT, SAT early junior year?
Yeah, so that is our goal. You know, I will say in the A pathway, sometimes you get students that want to take it in 10th grade. I'm going to tell you what I've heard just from colleges and college counselors. Colleges are really looking for students to be taking it junior year. They feel like sophomore year is too far back in time from when they're, you know, applying to college. So they will have the knowledge necessary for those exams. And if you look at the standards for those exams, and if, you know, when the pandemic's over and you want to come peruse the math office, you'll see that we have index cards all over the walls of the math office that have all of the standards with coding on them that tells us if it's on the ACT or the SAT. And we've moved those index cards around to make sure that by the time students would normally take those exams, they've hit the content that they need for it.
The question about the optional extension problems, and are they the problems of the week? I will have an answer for you. I just want to make sure that my understanding is clear between 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in those terms. So I will answer that momentarily. Nope, they're called extension problems. I think problems of the week are in 6th grade, so that would be the difference.
Yes,
Okay.
the 6th grade is the one that uses that terminology of problems of the week. Yeah.
Okay. That's the beauty of having the cell phone next to you. I quickly checked in with another teacher and they confirmed my suspicions. So, okay.
And just so people maybe understand the distinction between like those two. So problems of the week are typically more general in topic, whereas an extension problem would be more specific to the content that's going on in the classroom at the time.
And guys, just so everyone knows that all the extension problems will be posting them on the math website. Math 7 has a website. It is extraordinary. So they'll all be in one spot. So it's not like you won't know where those extension problems are. Okay. And by the way, as we're doing this, the seventh grade teachers are actually rolling this out to their students. So it's nice that we're all going to be hearing the same information around the same time. So if you want to talk to your children tonight, at least half of them will have listened to Mrs. Pace and Mrs. Pasquale about this information, so you can review it and talk to them about it.
Question there about the regents. I'm sure Ms. Kay will say the same. The science actually has a greater number of regents than math does. Math, we only have students take the Algebra 1 regents. So for right now, we are planning as if students will be sitting for the regents exam at the end of the year. Do we know if the regents exams are happening? Nobody knows, but we are planning right now as if the regents exams will occur.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mrs. Pellegrino.
Thank you.
Mrs. Kay.
Hi.
Welcome. And I think we're ready to roll.
Awesome. Just in time, right? So thanks, everyone. It's good to see you all. I'm going to review quickly the science pathways. I know you saw the math ones just recently. So if you look, you could see that the traditional path in middle school science is everybody starts in the same place in 6th grade, and then they transition to 7th grade. In the middle of 7th grade, the teachers start looking at several different criteria for placement for acceleration and advancement. And in our high school courses, there is an A after those courses, and they can mean one of two things or both. So it could mean acceleration or advancement. So right around now, we start to really hone in on some of the behaviors that we know based on research and looking at data from previous students and success throughout their experience in Byram Hills, how they achieve in their various science courses. So looking at those behavior points and their math and science grades, we make a decision as to where we believe students would be the most successful, either in Science 8, or they could go on to take the physical setting earth science course, which is a high school course. It shows up on their high school transcript as a transfer credit, and their actual Regents grade goes on the transcript as well. Now, one of the things that we've noticed as one of the most important skills that students need to have when they start to accelerate is mathematical and computational skills, because we start to see a real issue with this at the end of, or sometimes in chemistry, at the end of chemistry, when the students have to start considering physics or advanced placement courses. So there's been a lot of questions in the past as to whether or not if a student does not take earth science in 8th grade and doesn't accelerate, does it prevent them from having opportunities for advancement in high school? And the answer to that is no, because if you look up at the chart that's on the screen, you can see that even a student that is in 8th grade science, which we call Science 8, and they are not taking accelerated earth science regents because we've determined at that particular point they don't have the skills that would afford them the opportunity to achieve the success that they're used to seeing, and that they would be better placed working on those skills in 8th grade or Science 8, those students can go on to high school. They take physical earth science regents, and then while they're in the regents program, they start looking at some of the skills that they know that the students need for advancement. Notice I'm not calling it acceleration anymore, because they're not taking the course 1 year earlier than their grade level peers. Instead, they're actually advancing and taking a program that is more rich in curriculum, preparing them for higher level skills for AP or SAT2s. So if they are on that trajectory, then what happens is their science teacher in 9th grade, along with the student and the parents and the guidance counselor, will start investigating whether or not that particular student will consider taking living environment Regents Bio A, which would be advancement. They would be then going into 10th grade and taking it with their with some 9th graders, you know, most of the kids that took earth science the previous year. However, they're still advancing. And then they can go on the following year as 11th graders. And what we recommend that they do is they take physical setting chemistry advanced and simultaneously take one of our elective courses, which is a concepts in physics course, so that they actually have an experience in a solid physics class. It's not a double period class, so it doesn't take up too many periods in their class, but then they've satisfied taking earth science, bio, chem, and physics before they exit high school, and it opens up their senior year to take any science elective that they choose. So you could see that's the trajectory that a student can take if they didn't take earth science in 8th grade. If they do take earth science in 8th grade, it's pretty self-explanatory. They then take bio in 10th, chem, and then they have 2 years where they can take science electives. And if you notice at the top, the stars, it says ASR, that stands for our Authentic Science Research Program, that the students take in conjunction with their courses. We start planning in 9th grade. One can argue that we start planning in 7th grade, because in a traditional year, we would have the science research program speak to the kids in the library and kind of go over, so the students can understand that there is a course that exists and start aspiring to thinking about some things they might want to look into and research if they are to enroll in this course or this program. It's not a course, it's a 3-year course that exists. So that's what that means in terms of this graphic. So this is another visual, and this visual is available in the course selection booklet that's available on the high school guidance website. And this just shows our science course offerings. On the left-hand side, you will see that it shows our core courses, which are those that are the pillars of the New York State Science Standards. And those are the ones that students have to fulfill for graduation requirements. There's a 3-2-1 rule in terms of the commissioner's regulations for graduation in New York State. The requirement is students have to take 3 years of science, 2 of the years have to be a lab, and they have to pass 1 Regents exam, and 1 of those 3 years has to be a living environment course. The only living environment course that exists in the Regents pillars is biology. And if a student doesn't take that as their course, then they have to take another year of a living environment credit, which other options exist, such as our biomedical engineering and anatomy and physiology part 1 and 2, or our AP biology. So if you notice on the right-hand side of our electives, our AP courses and our science research, we consider those electives because those aren't courses that all students decide to take. They're courses that students elect to take to fill in spots that are open in their schedule. So when you look back at the graphic before, and we don't have to go back there, when you look at the 11th grade and 12th grade year for the accelerated and advanced students, or the 12th grade year for the students that take the alternative pathway, there is still opportunities for students to take any of these electives, including the APs. This is just some data about our Authentic Science Research Program. This is also available on the orientation presentations that we have posted on our district website in different places, but it just tells a little bit about our science research course. I mean, it's no secret that our science research program is truly phenomenal, and the students have so many accolades that they get a lot of good publicity in our district and nationwide.
It speaks to their experience. And what I always tell a parent is, if your child isn't in earth science in 8th grade, that means nothing in terms of their opportunities in the Authentic Science Research Program. So they can either blossom later, or they can decide that this is one area of science that they really want to become involved with. So it is a truly phenomenal way to give students an experience in research that really is based on some of their own interests.
Thank you, Ms. Lappel, for that. And I'll piggyback on that to tell you for reassurance purposes with solid data that we have had students that did not accelerate in earth science become semifinalists. So I think that's an interesting piece of data for people to understand and to sort of the critical part about all of this science placement, and I'm sure Ms. Pellegrino said this previously, it's based on student readiness. And if we prematurely accelerate and push students, the hurdles that we put in their way that cause sort of roadblocks for their learning is so counterproductive that it's important for us to do a deep dig to make sure they have the skills and the tools they need to truly accelerate or advance. And the science research program is a full-bodied program where it's not just science that they're learning. They learn public speaking skills, they learn writing skills, they learn executive functioning skills, they learn organizational strategies, they learn interview skills, they learn how to work with professionals in the field and how it reflects on them as a person in the district. So it's a very multi-dimensional program, and there's a wide variety of learning that takes place there. This is available in different types of mailings that will go home, but it just shows you the acceleration criteria that we use in science, and the behavior points there's 5 points, and the behaviors are behaviors that look at all of the skills that we are certain that students need to be successful. So when I use the word skills, this is exactly what I'm referencing, because that word skills can have like a very vague meaning, and it can mean a lot of different things to all of us. So these behaviors are those skills and behaviors that we know the students need to experience success. And when I say success, that's another word like skills. What we found is that students do not like to get grades lower than B pluses. So I'm not saying that is a good or bad thing, but what I notice is culturally that when we make these kind of placement criteria and we start to use data to support the students, when we say success, our success is knowing that that's what success in most cases means for students, is getting grades that they're used to getting based on standards and behaviors that we set for them to reach as benchmarks. So their classroom average in math, their classroom average in science, and these behaviors all put together have to equal the amount that they need to qualify for earth science, and that's 8 points. Here are these behaviors, and there are different, there's more information and detail to describe at a deeper level what these behaviors mean, and that will also be on the documentation and mailing that goes home to you from Ms. Lappel's office. But if you look at these behaviors, you could see generally these are the things that we look at when we kind of, rate the students according to these different behaviors. And the one that I highlighted in yellow is very, very important, because this is the skill or the zone where mathematical computation and data analysis comes in. And if students aren't strong in this, it really affects their what we call science fluency. And I want to use sort of a mental model of, going and maybe some of our language students, experience this at times, but the same thing applies to science, because science is really an approach, and we're using this approach in other subjects and putting it all together for an outcome. So if we go to a restaurant and we want to order in a different language, we have several different steps of a problem that we have to apply. We have to first think about what we want to order, then we have to try to figure out on the menu what it is, and then interpret it, and then actually try to order it in that language. Well, what happens in science when students leave predominantly earth science, but then they go into biology, which is a different type of a science, then when they go to chemistry, this really becomes magnified, because in chemistry, these multiple step problems and applications happen. And if students don't have that science fluency and the ability to take the content with the mathematical computation skills and really understand those concepts for the purposes of application, they start to segregate things, and that's where struggle emerges. So these are those behavior skills, and we take it really seriously, and the teachers spend a lot of time trying to make sure that when they rate the students according to these skills, that they do it in a way that assures student readiness.
And
Next.
Mrs. Kay, I want to, I had mentioned prior that when we went into remote in the spring, and just now that we're in a hybrid model, there was a worry in the spring on my part in terms of, what is our placement going to look like? Are we going to place the students appropriately? Because that's always what we want. And if you look at these behaviors, they really accentuate what is necessary and what you need in remote learning to be successful. And so when we look at engage in tasks independently, it became more obvious. And it wasn't whether it's good or bad, or I gotcha or I didn't. It was more that we could see how a student can engage in something a little bit more independently, because they need to be a little bit more independent when they're learning remotely at times. Right? And so the motivation and the grit with the growth mindset, again, that just became a little bit more accentuated, where we were able to see students that we thought might be able to do it, students that we had worries for reasons like actual data, or students that we knew were going to be high flyers because they could do all these things. And if students can't do it right away, meaning if in your 7th grade year, your child, your son or daughter seems to be on the cusp, but you're not sure if they can manage it or not, here's the good news. We want the placement to be correct. So we will use the summer, and we will use the first month of 8th grade to make sure our placements are correct. You can reach out to us, we can have conversations, and if we feel like we're not sure, and maybe your child could be doing this kind of work, it's called a watch list, and we work with teachers. The earth science teachers or the science aids teachers are the same teachers. We meet with them on a regular basis for the first month and a half of school to make sure that we have those students placed correctly. And maybe there are some students who are ready for it, and maybe some students who we place don't feel like they want to do it anymore. There's usually not a ton of shifting because the process is very good, but we always are invested in making sure that what we've done is good for the student.
Thanks, Ms. Lappel, and that's really important. And having my own children, I think I respect Byram Hill's process so much because they do have that built in. And it isn't just so cut and dry, that students do have the opportunity to show that we're human and we do grow. So I think that's an outstanding thing that's built into our program. The other thing I might add is that when students get grades that are like, let's say, for example, as students in science, 7th grade science, and they're getting a B+. The one thing I might be asking the student is, why is it a B+, and what can you do to get your science, your science skills to a place where, you want it to be an A. And I'm not talking about the grades, because I think what I'm trying to say is we want to shift the students away from focusing on the letter grades or the number grades, and start and continue, I should say, continue to have them really recognize that, look at the indicators of what that's measuring. And if you truly want to grow, what is it that you have to do to grow into the area that would help them become a stronger science student? Okay, so this right here is just, a little graphic right here to show the new science standards that were rolled out quite some time ago, and we're implementing them in Byram Hills. And it's really focusing on claim, evidence, and reasoning. And it's a 3-dimensional approach. So if you hear anyone talk about the science standards, just like you've heard people talk about the Common Core, it's a 3-dimensional approach where it's content, cross-cutting concepts, and science and engineering practices, which are the skills. So there's the content, there's those multi-dimensional topics like energy and the things that we hear in every single science subject. And then there is the actual skills and behaviors that we use to act and live like scientists. So we want to ask ourselves, how does this really work? And that curiosity drives all of those other things. Again, science in 3D, just to give you a better sense of what the 3 dimensions are. And again, these are the science and engineering practices. So that highlighted behavior from the previous slide of the 1 of 5 behaviors that we look at. If you notice here, these are the science and engineering practices that are part of the standards, and we look at the progression of these through their science experience from kindergarten, or actually preschool, all the way through 12th grade. And we want to see that the students are building on these skills throughout their school experience. And if you notice, I again highlighted mathematical and computational thinking, not suggesting that this is, you know, more important, but I think what I'm saying is that this is one of the main skills that cause students to struggle if they don't have a strong foundation in this early on. And this is one of the things, and that's why we use the math average as part of the indicators for placement, to make sure that our placement is solid and that kids have what they need to succeed. And this is just a little kind of where you can find information. The website is always filled with information. You could feel free to contact me anytime. My information is on the district website. And then there is the guidance site, which has our course curriculum in our course selection booklet. And it has all the prerequisites and all the different graphics for all of our courses, but it also shows science and the different trajectories that I included in this presentation.
Most of the math charts can be found on the math acceleration page. I'm going to be sending out some information. I'll try to include these charts, and we're also going to have this whole presentation up and running. We've filmed it or video taped it, or and we're going to be sending it out to everyone. So in case you missed it, or you want to rewind it, or you just want to watch it again, it'll be available for you. I want to thank Mrs. Pellegrino and Mrs. K and let you guys go. I just wanted, Mr. Ancona, I wanted to share a few more things with the parents, the HCC parents. So Mrs. K, Mrs. Pellegrino, I know you guys have classes to teach and teachers to support. The time that you put in to prepare for this, and also the amazing amount of time that you are supporting our teachers this past summer and this fall. Thanks. We haven't missed a step because of how hard you all have worked with the teachers and your vision and insight. So thanks for your expertise.
Well, thank you very much.
I
wish I could take credit, but I feel like the teachers are the ones that really deserve all the credit, because they're really working hard, as I'm sure everyone can.
Your leadership, understood. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you. And I have to give you and Mr. Ancona credit. You definitely steer the ship and make it very doable for us. So thanks for your support. The partnership between all of us makes Byram Hills great. So thanks everyone. It's so good. And any questions, always feel free to be in touch. Happy holidays. Bye.
I want to, Mr. Ancona, I always go back to the essential question of HCC, and it's about active learning and risk-taking, rigor, and healthy mindset. We've spoken a lot, and I think everyone is knows about a lot of the structures that we have in place that we redesigned to support our students. But we want to just highlight how we are trying to make sure we support the emotional wellness of our children, especially now that we're going into the winter. The news is tough in terms of the pandemic, and it takes a lot of energy, and we want to make sure we give our kids the emotional energy to be positive and to manage stressful times, and to know that we're all in it together. Most importantly is that when you know that you're not alone, when you know that there's adults, when you know that there are peers that are experiencing some of what you're experiencing, good and bad, it's a very important element in our emotional wellness. What I have on the screen now is what our hashtag kindness at HCC is alive and well. And this month, our guidance counselors had our XPod students share with them what they're grateful for. And you can see that a lot of them are answers that we'd hope to see. But it's another feel-good moment where kids can put it together, they can reflect on what they're grateful for, and they can share it with one another. There are other ways that we want to make sure our students are active, involved. And again, Mr. Ancona and I have a very deep belief that when you help others, when you do good for others, what it does for your own emotional wellness cannot be understated. So to that end, we just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of ways that your children can be involved, whether it be through our hashtag kindness days and our gratitude days. We are implementing mindfulness during wellness periods. Wellness periods are the periods that are attached to lunch. We used to call it recess, but now we can't have all of our students together outside on the field. So teachers now have those wellness times, and a lot of times they're taking their kids out. That's what we've asked them to do. But with the help of Mr. Ancona, and he coordinated this with our guidance department. We have a guidance intern, and then also some of our teaching aides, Mrs. Lozado being specifically really active and involved in this. We are working to have each of our 7th and 8th grade teams, once a week, your child will experience a mindful moment or a wellness time with either Mrs. Lozado or Miss Hammond. And it's time for teachers also then that they can work with one another, because we're relieving them of that wellness. They can use their planning is so extensive that we try to provide them with little glimmers of moments to do that in addition to what they have. But more importantly, we thought that this was a great opportunity for our children to do something a little different and be more aware of their emotional wellness with a mindful moment. Mr. Ancona, jump in if there's anything else that you want to add. I did also think it was important that helping others, our clubs are still actively involved. We have the Power of One. They did a wildfire with all the wildfires in the West this past fall. The students in the Power of One felt it was important to do some fundraising and contribute to the Red Cross. So they had a huge jar of Jolly Ranchers in the office, and students could come in and they put their guess of how many Jolly Ranchers there were in the jar through a form electronically. So no one had to really touch any paper, because we're always trying to limit our touch points, but they did contribute money to participate in that. And so we did have a winner. I think Hudson Dean was a winner.
He was. Yes, he was, because I was trying to grab the jar from him. That's where but you're right. Keeping kids involved in those extracurricular activities is paramount to just keeping them involved in the community and maintaining those relations with kids that, you know, they can be a little bit more freer after school, even though they're virtual experiences, they're still experiences that they get to communicate and collaborate with other kids on topics that they enjoy.
So right now, right, Mr. Ancona, Gotta Have Soul, we're doing that with Power of One. There's going to be a walkathon where we can still do that outside and kids can contribute money. So ask your son or daughter if they want to be involved with Gotta Have Soul. It's an organization in, I think it's New England and Connecticut, where it provides children with sneakers and active wear, really sneakers, so that they can participate and have some things that are necessary. So Gotta Have Soul is the organization that raises money to provide sneakers and footwear to children in this area. And then the VIP Leo Club, there is going to be a toy drive. We'll have more information coming to you about that. And they do have an eyeglass collection. I know that I have glasses that for some reason I'm still emotionally attached to. I think I interviewed with these when I first was trying to become the principal or hoping to be the principal of HCC. So I have a hard time getting rid of them. My dad told me I look smart and that I should keep them on all times. So, but I think I'm ready to put them and contribute them to a greater cause. So if you have any eyeglasses at home, please know that if you send them in with your son or daughter, there are cases, there are drop boxes throughout the school that they don't really have to do much and put them into the box. And then there is a 6th grade campaign against hunger as well. Mr. Ancona, last thing I want to talk about, do you want to walk us through just the last 2 opportunities you wanted to make sure parents were aware of that existed?
Sure. So we've recreated homework help and math homework center. We used to do math homework help and math homework center here in school, but we're unable to have kids stay in school. So we've created those clubs virtually. We've renamed them Bobcat Corner and Math Homework Club. So 5 days a week from 3:30 to 4:30. If your child needs extra help or just wants to bounce some ideas off of an adult, from 3:30 to 4:30, we have a Bobcat Corner. And we also have a separate math homework club. So if they need help with math specifically, we have math teachers, also 5 days a week, from 3:15 or 3:30 to 4:30, that can help them with math work specifically.
If you want information about that, it went out in last communication last Friday. I believe there were links, but we can resend it again. It's in an activities booklet, and the links are all there to join the classrooms.
Yeah. So lunchtime is going to look a little bit, well, it's not going to look a little bit differently. It still looks the same, but we're asking children that when they sit down at their desks, we've outfitted every desk in the cafeteria or the back gym with a QR code, which if children scan, it will ask them where they're sitting, and every desk has a number now, so that we know exactly where students are sitting in these large spaces of lunch. We also created another space for kids to have lunch within the building. It's in the 6th grade wing. There are 2 classrooms that students can choose or reserve a spot to have lunch in another area other than the cafeteria and back gym. And students can always, if they choose, have lunch outside, either in the back by the back gym or in the front by the main cafeteria.
During that time, they can eat lunch outside. In the front area, we also have, I think everyone has seen, we have coned off the parent drop-off loop. So if kids want to go outside and eat and they don't want to sit there, they can eat their lunch walking, and they don't have to, but as it gets chillier, but as our worries about the season and the uptick in numbers continue, that is an option. They can be active and walking just in like a little track as they're eating, and they can always ask us for other options as well. So that ends our presentation. We are so happy to see everyone here. It takes a lot of energy to be together, but in a good way. It's so different than what we're used to. I want you all to have confidence that we will continue to find ways to provide variety for our children in our community in terms of what they can do during wellness time. We are going to try to find continued ways to keep our community together. I think it is essential that we feel one another's connection and the work that we do, whether it's academic or social, or that we're all in this together. So please know that we're always trying to plan and move forward. The challenge is that there are constraints that have never existed before. When we try to do any kind of activity, we're quite limited, as we should be, in terms of mixing cohorts or providing opportunities where kids can develop community. It a lot of times will have to be remotely, but we're working on some plans and we're going to share them out in the next week or two. And in the meantime, we hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And we thank you so much for the support that you provide us each and every day. Your children are amazing, and there's nothing like them. So thanks for sharing them with us each and every day. Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Okay. Take care.